The waitress was fired for a broken plate. The Mafia boss called her a car within 42 seconds. The Red Harbor Diner was a special kind of hell on Tuesday nights, especially when the rain came down so hard it felt like New Avalon was trying to wash itself into the sea. The 24/7 neon sign outside the window wasn't buzzing. It was screaming, casting a sick pink glow over the condensation and the faces of the graveyard shift regulars. The air was thick with the smell of old coffee, sizzling grease, and the damp wool of coats that hadn't been dry in days. I was drowning in it. My name is Lyra. I'm 23, small enough to slip between tables, and I'd been on my feet for 9 hours. My apron, already smelling sour, was soaked down the front from a spilled water pitcher an hour ago. The noise was of physical weight plates clattering, the grill hissing, 3 different conversations shouting over each other, and the relentless drumming of the rain on the tin roof. I was balancing 3 plates on my left arm, gravy congealing, when a trucker snagged his jacket on a chair, stumbling back right into my path. It was over before I could even register the movement. The top plate, the cheeseburger deluxe, tilted. I tried to correct, my tired muscles screaming, but it was gone. It hit the linoleum with a sound that seemed to cut straight through the diner's chaos. A sharp, final crack. White ceramic and French fries sprayed across the floor. The diner didn't stop, but one voice did. Lyra. Owen, my manager. His voice was like spoiled milk. He shoved his way through the tables, his face, already slick with sweat under the fluorescent lights, tightening into a familiar knot of rage. He didn't look at me, and he looked at the mess. That's the 3rd time this week, you useless. He spat. He didn't bend down. He kicked the largest piece of the broken plate. It skittered across the floor and slammed into the jukebox, making it skip a beat. I'm docking that from your pay. You know what these cost? Owen, it was an accident. The man... I don't care, he snarled, finally looking at me. His eyes were small and mean. I don't care if the mayor himself walked in here and tripped you. You're clumsy, you're slow, and you're costing me money. He pointed a greasy finger at me, then at the door. You're fired. Get your apron off. Get out. The words hit me harder than the trucker had. Fired, just like that, in the middle of the floor, with a dozen pairs of eyes on me, some pitying, most just waiting for their coffee refills. My cheeks burned. I could feel the heat rising up my neck, a terrible hot shame that made my eyes water. Owen, please, I whispered, my voice trembling. I need this shift. I just need... You need to get out. I started to untie the strings of my apron, my fingers fumbling with the knot. That's when I saw them. 2 men had been sitting at the booth by the entrance. They hadn't been there 10 minutes ago. Now, they were standing, blocking the revolving door. They weren't big in the way truckers were big. They were dense, compact, wearing dark suits that were just a little too sharp for a place like this. They didn't look at me. They were looking at Owen. One of them, the one with a thin scar running along his jaw, caught Owen's eye and nodded. Owen's expression changed. The petty anger drained away, replaced by something else, a kind of nervous recognition. He walked over to them, wiping his hands on his own apron. I couldn't hear everything, just fragments carried on the draft. Blue Lantern Union, the scarred man murmured. Owen nodded, glancing back at me. She's nobody. Just fired her. That's the problem, the other man said. His voice was lower, smoother. She's not nobody. She's got a marker, a family debt, and the union wants to collect tonight. A different kind of cold, one that had nothing to do with the rain, flooded my veins. Blue Lantern Union, the name on the letter, the one tucked inside my wallet, right next to the $14 that was all I had in the world, a threat letter, demanding payments on a loan I never took, for a funeral debt my mother supposedly left. My heart wasn't just beating, it was slamming against my ribs, a trapped bird in a cage. The rain on the roof sounded like fists. I clutched my torn apron, the rough fabric digging into my palms. Fired, $14. And now this. Owen pointed back at me. Take it up with her. She's off my property. He stalked toward me, his face grim. "You heard the men. You've got business. Do it outside." He grabbed my upper arm, his fingers digging in. "Owen, stop," I pleaded, pulling back. "Get out, Lyra, now." He gave me a hard shove toward the door, toward the two men. I stumbled backward, my worn sneakers finding no purchase on the slick floor. I slipped on a stray piece of lettuce, my arms pinwheeled. I was going down. "That's enough." The voice was not loud, it was soft. It was absolute steel. It came from the last stool at the counter, the one in the shadows, farthest from the door. Everything stopped. The hiss of the grill, the clatter of forks. Even Owen froze, his hand still outstretched from shoving me. The entire diner seemed to be holding its breath. The only sound was the radio, suddenly lost between stations, emitting a high, whining static. I caught my balance, breathing hard. The man at the counter put his spoon down, resting it neatly on his napkin. He hadn't been eating, just drinking coffee. He wore a simple black wool coat, dark and expensive, and no tie. He looked out of place, but unlike the two men at the door, he seemed to own the space he was in. He turned his head, and his eyes found mine. They were cold, not mean, like Owen's, just cold, and incredibly, frighteningly aware, and he looked at me, then at Owen, then at the two men by the door. His face was calm, sharp angles in the dim light. Dante Villaro. I didn't know his name then, but I knew his reputation. Everyone in New Avalon knew of the Villaro Syndicate. They were ghosts who owned half the city, operating by rules no one else understood. Dante Villaro looked at Owen. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He simply took a phone from his coat pocket, a sleek, black device. He pressed a single button, held it to his ear. He didn't speak into it, he just listened, then he hung up. The silence in the diner stretched, thin and tight. I counted the seconds by the pounding in my head, 10, 20, 30. At 42 seconds, a set of headlights cut through the rain, a black sedan, gleaming and immaculate, slid to a stop right in front of the diner's entrance. It wasn't a cab, it was something else. The passenger door opened, and a driver in a dark suit emerged, popping open a large black umbrella instantly, holding it ready. No one had moved. Dante Villaro stood up. He was taller than I thought. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small fold of cash, dropping it on the counter. Enough for his coffee. Then he added another bill, a 50. "For the plate," he said, his voice still quiet. He looked at me. His gaze wasn't kind. It wasn't anything. It was just an assessment. Then he nodded toward the waiting car, the open door, the umbrella shielding the pavement from the storm. "Let's go." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Owen was frozen. The two men from the union looked confused. Their authority suddenly vanished. The entire diner, from the cooks at the grill to the truckers in their booths, watched me. I was shaking. I had $14 in my pocket. I had debt collectors at the door. I had no job. And the most dangerous man in New Avalon was holding one out for me. I looked at the rain, at the men who wanted to hurt me, and then at the open door of the warm, dry car. I took my first step. I walked out of the Red Harbor Diner and into the storm. The revolving door pushed me out into the biting wind, and for a second, I froze on the sidewalk. The two union men, the ones in the sharp suits, didn't follow. They just watched me from the doorway, their faces blank and patient, as if they knew I had nowhere to run. Then Dante Villaro was beside me. He didn't take my arm. He didn't touch my back. He simply walked close enough that his height and the solid wool of his coat created a barrier, cutting the wind that was trying to steal my breath. I could feel the heat radiating off him, a dry warmth that smelled faintly of expensive soap and something I couldn't place. Something clean that completely erased the diner's lingering scent of grease and despair. The driver held the umbrella steady over my head, a perfect silent circle of shelter in the chaos. I ducked inside the sedan. Dante slid in after me. The driver closed the door, and the world vanished. The drumming rain, the screaming pink neon, Owen's voice. The clatter of plates, all of it was gone. It was muffled by heavy glass and thick metal, leaving a silence so profound it felt heavy. The only sounds were the rhythmic sweep of the windshield wipers and the quiet click of the heater as Dante switched it on. Warm air, smelling of clean leather and filters, pushed through the vents. It hit my soaked apron, and I shivered violently as the dampness on my skin turned cold. He didn't look at me. He watched the city lights smear past the window as the car pulled smoothly into traffic. "Your name," he said. It wasn't a question. "Lyra." "Lyra," he repeated. The name sounded different in his voice. Not soft, just measured, as if he were testing its weight. The Blue Lantern Union. Why are they interested in a waitress who just lost her job? My hands were shaking so badly I had to clench them in the lap of my damp apron. My mother. She passed away 6 months ago. There was a funeral loan. I couldn't cover it all. Owen, the manager. He set it up. He said it was a community fund to help people in the neighborhood. Owen, he said the name flatly, storing it away. "They sent a letter last week. The one I have in my wallet," I whispered. The shame returning, hot and acidic. They said the interest ballooned. They wanted thousands, an amount I could never... I don't have it. Dante turned his head, and his eyes, dark in the shadows of the car, found mine. They weren't there for the money. "Lyra? I don't understand. They want to collect the debt. They've been threatening to take my apartment." He ignored me. Reaching into the breast pocket of his coat, he pulled out a small, flat digital recorder. He clicked it on. A tiny red light glowed steadily. "This community fund Owen set up. Did the paperwork mention the Harbor Sentinel Bureau?" The name sounded official, vaguely familiar from a bus advertisement. I think so. It looked like a city seal. It said they guaranteed the loan, that it was part of a neighborhood program. "They did," he said, his voice dry. "The Harbor Sentinel Bureau is giving legitimacy to dozens of these shadow unions. They guarantee the loans for people the banks won't touch. In exchange, the unions get priority access to city-controlled warehouse permits. The entire operation stinks, all of it coming from the port." He held out his hand, not demanding, but expecting. The letter. I fumbled in my purse, my fingers brushing against the folded $14 that felt like useless paper. I pulled out the creased, damp envelope and handed it to him. He didn't read the threats. He didn't look at the impossible number. His eyes went straight to the bottom of the page, to the scanned copy of the original agreement. "This signature," he said, tapping the paper. His fingernail was clean, cut short. "Is this yours?" I leaned in. It was my name, Lyra, written in a looping, unfamiliar script that tried too hard. "No, that's not my handwriting." Dante nodded slowly, as if I had just confirmed the final piece of a puzzle he was already holding. He clicked off the recorder, the tiny red light dying. "They aren't just collecting a debt. Lyra, someone is using your name, your forged signature to lock down a shipping line. The debt is just the leash. It's the excuse to keep you quiet or to make you disappear if you start asking the wrong questions." A new, sharper fear cut straight through the shame. This was bigger than a broken plate. This was bigger than Owen. Disappear. "They don't like loose ends," he said, as if discussing the weather. The car turned, leaving the industrial noise of the harbor district. We drove into streets I barely recognized, older, cleaner. The buildings were brick and stone, not concrete and steel. The rain seemed gentler here. We were in Little Vicenza. The driver pulled into a narrow, clean alley and stopped at a heavy, dark wood door with a small, unlit lantern hanging above it. "Where are we?" "Casa Sorella," Dante said. Getting out, the driver was already there. Umbrella open, my family's restaurant. He led me inside. The difference was jarring. The diner had smelled of old grease and desperation. This place smelled of garlic and roasting tomatoes and fresh bread. The air was warm. The main dining room was dark, tables covered in white cloths for the next day, chairs stacked neatly, but the kitchen in the back was brightly lit, a hive of quiet, late-night activity. "We'll get you something hot to eat, dry clothes. You can stay the night." He said it to the empty dining room, not to me, already moving toward the light. I stopped. My sneakers squeaked on the polished wood. He took 2 steps before realizing I wasn't following. I clutched the strap of my purse, the only thing in the world that was mine. I don't even know you." My voice trembled. I can't pay you for any of this." He turned. His face was difficult to read in the dim light. For the first time, his expression wasn't cold. It was something else. Patience. A heavy, ancient patience. "You have the right to say no. Lyra, you can walk back out that door, into the rain, back to Owen and back to the union men who are certainly waiting for you by now." He paused, letting the reality of my situation settle around me. "But fuori," he said, the Italian word rolling off his tongue with a soft finality. "Out there, they don't ask if you're tired, they don't ask if you're hungry, they just take—" He didn't wait for my answer. He turned and walked toward the kitchen. My feet, of their own accord, followed him. The kitchen was a blast of enveloping heat and noise, but it was good noise. Classical music played softly from a small radio. A large, older woman, her gray hair pulled into a tight bun, was stirring a massive pot of sauce, a wooden spoon in her hand like a scepter. She looked up as we entered, her sharp eyes landing on me, taking in my soaked apron and shivering frame. She scowled at Dante. "You're bringing home strays again. Dante, this one looks half drowned." "She's cold. Marietta, get her some soup, and the room upstairs." Marietta looked at me, her scowl softening just a fraction. She pointed the wooden spoon at a stool by the massive steel prep table. "Sit. Eat first, then you can be scared." A small, hysterical bubble of laughter escaped my throat. It was a tiny, broken sound, but it was the first time I'd laughed all day. I sat. Dante watched me for a moment, an unreadable expression on his face. He placed something on the table in front of me, next to the bowl of flour, a simple, disposable phone, a burner. "If anyone contacts you," he said, his voice low, "Owen, the union, anyone you don't know, you answer. And you put it on speaker." His gaze was sharp, an intensity that was both protective and probing. He wasn't just giving me shelter. He was setting a trap. I wasn't sure if I was the bait, or if I was just the first piece he needed to find a different target. A steaming bowl of minestrone was placed in front of me. It was hot, rich, and real. I picked up the spoon, my hands still shaking, but less now. I took a bite. The warmth spread through my chest, pushing back the immediate cold. Dante stood by the kitchen's back door, which looked out onto a small, rain-soaked garden. He was watching the storm. Why, I asked, my voice stronger now, bolstered by the food. "Why did you do that?" "In the diner, you don't know me." He turned from the window. The bright kitchen light caught the hard line of his jaw. "Owen was enjoying it," he said simply. "He was feeding off your fear. The union men were doing the same. It was a transaction. They were selling your panic, and he was happy to make the sale." He looked at me, his eyes holding mine, leaving me nowhere to hide. I hate people who use fear as currency. The room Marietta gave me was small, tucked under the eaves on the top floor of Casa Sorella. It was technically a sitting room, not a bedroom, with a floral-patterned couch made up with clean, crisp sheets and a heavy down comforter. It was the nicest bed I'd slept in my life. I was wearing a pair of soft gray sweatpants and a thick wool sweater that belonged to one of Marietta's sons. They were huge on me, but they were warm, and they smelled like clean laundry, not the sour dampness of my own clothes. I should have been exhausted. My body was a leaden weight, my muscles aching from the 9-hour shift and the adrenaline crash, but I couldn't sleep. I lay on my back, staring at the slanted ceiling, and listened to the rain. It was different here than at the diner. The diner's roof was tin, and the rain was an assault, a constant, panic drumming. Here, the roof was slate, and the rain was a rhythm, a steady, lonely beat in the dark. My mind kept flashing back to the diner, to Owen's face, to the sound of the plate shattering. But that faded. And the real fear took its place. The apartment. It was a tiny, one-bedroom walk-up in a tenement building on Pier 19. The paint was peeling and the radiator hissed like a snake, but it was mine. It was the last place I had lived with my mom. The only thing I had left of her was a single, framed photograph on the nightstand. It was an old one, from before she got sick. Her hair was dark and thick, and she was smiling at a street fair, holding a cone of cotton candy. That apartment held that picture. It held the last 6 years of my life, and now, because of a fake loan for a funeral that was already paid for, they were going to take it. I squeezed my eyes shut, and the image of the letter from the Blue Lantern Union filled my vision. The threatening, official-looking print, the impossible sum. My body tensed, a cold knot of panic tightening in my stomach. I was safe here, in this warm, quiet room. But my life was out there, on Pier 19, and it was about to be erased. A vibration, sharp and sudden, buzzed against the hardwood floor. My head snapped toward the sound, the burner phone. Dante had left it on the small end table. It was a cold, alien object in the cozy room. It vibrated again, a persistent, demanding buzz. My heart climbed into my throat. I slid off the couch, my bare feet hitting the cold wood. I stared at the phone. It was like a snake coiled on the table. When he said to answer it, he said to put it on speaker. But this was a text. The screen lit up with a preview, an unknown number. I picked it up. My hand was shaking. The phone felt too light, a cheap piece of plastic holding the weight of my entire future. I unlocked it. The message was short, no greeting. Tomorrow morning, $8,000. Fallow dock. Be late, lose the apartment. 8,000. It might as well have been 8 million. Fallow dock was a derelict, condemned pier on the other side of the harbor, a place people went to disappear. The air left my lungs. I was coiling in on myself, the fear so potent it was making me physically smaller, my shoulders hunching, my stomach clenching until it ached. I couldn't breathe in this room. The walls, which had felt safe a minute ago, now felt like a cage. I had to move. I crept out of the room and down the narrow attic stairs, my hand sliding along the smooth, polished banister. The rest of the house was dark and silent, but as I reached the main floor, I saw a thin blade of yellow light cutting the darkness from the kitchen. He was still awake. I walked toward the light, pulled by an invisible string. I didn't know what I was going to do. Show him confess that I was a lost cause, that he'd wasted his time on me. I stood in the doorway, and he was at the same table where I'd eaten my soup. The big, bright overhead lights were off. The only illumination came from a small, yellow-globed lamp on the counter, the kind meant for reading recipes. It cast deep shadows across the kitchen, but it lit him perfectly. He was sitting with his back to me, nursing a tiny cup of espresso. A thin curl of steam, white against the dark, rose from the cup and was caught in the yellow light. The rain was softer here, just a whisper against the kitchen window. He was perfectly still. He looked like a painting, a noir portrait of a man entirely at ease with the night. I must have made a sound, a hitch in my breath, maybe. He didn't turn around, but I saw his shoulders tense. Just for a second, he knew I was there. He set his cup down in its saucer. The sound was a delicate click in the silence. The message he asked, his voice low and calm. He still hadn't turned. I couldn't speak. My throat was tight with panic. I just nodded, uselessly, at his back. I stepped into the light, my hand held out, the phone screen glowing. He turned then, slowly, on the stool. He looked at the phone, then at my face. He saw the terror there. He took the phone from my trembling hand, his fingers brushing mine. His skin was warm. He read the message. I watched his face. Nothing. No shock. No pity. No anger. Then, a corner of his mouth lifted in the faintest, coldest smile I had ever seen. It wasn't a smile of humor. It was a smile of recognition. Fallow dock, he mused, as if they'd just suggested a poor location for a meeting. He looked at the number. It's a Harbor Sentinel Bureau prefix. But he's right. It's routed through a burner SIM. Sloppy. They're getting arrogant. $8,000, I whispered, the words tearing at my throat. I don't have it. I only have $14. I can't. They don't want the money. Lyra, he set the phone on the table, pushing it aside. They want the apartment. They want you out. With nothing. On the street. So you have nowhere to complain. This isn't about debt. It's about property. He gestured to the stool Marietta had given me. I sank onto it, my legs giving out. The Bureau calls it Community Asset Recovery. He explained, his voice even, like a professor giving a lecture. They find someone in a desirable building, someone on the edge, a late utility bill, a medical debt, a funeral loan. They buy the debt through a shell like the Blue Lantern Union. Then they bury you in fees, late fees, processing fees, legal threat fees. They make the number so high you can't possibly pay. You panic, you miss the deadline. He leaned forward, the yellow light catching his eyes, making them look almost golden. Then the Bureau steps in, using the default as a legal pretext to seize the asset. They repossess your apartment, claiming it's for the good of the community. They hand it over to a developer, who pays them a finder's fee under the table. They get rich. The developer gets rich. And you're just gone. Wiped off the ledger. I stared at him. The whole intricate, filthy machine laid bare. I wasn't just unlucky. I was being hunted. I just want it to stop, I said, the words breaking. A tear I hadn't even felt coming slid down my cheek. Hot and stinging. I just want to be left alone. I just want peace. Dante watched the tear fall. He didn't move to comfort me. He just watched. If you want quiet, Lara, he said, his voice very soft, you have to know where the noise is coming from. He stood up, walked to the counter, and poured hot water from a kettle into a mug. He slid the mug of plain, hot water in front of me. Tomorrow, he said, the Blue Lantern Union is hosting its annual waterfront fair. It's their big charity event. They give out free hot dogs and pledge money to fix the boardwalk. It's where they find new clients like your mother. It's where they launder their reputation. I looked up at him, confused. What does that have to do with me? They'll all be there, the union men, Owen, probably, volunteering, representatives from the Harbor Sentinel Bureau, shaking hands, kissing babies, the whole corrupt family, all in one place, smiling for the cameras. He offered me a choice, not with a question, but with a statement. You're going to come with me. We're going to go to the fair, and we're going to pull back the curtain. My first instinct was to say no, to run, to hide in this attic room and pretend the world wasn't burning. I wasn't a fighter. I wasn't a spy. I was a waitress who dropped a plate. What could I possibly do? But then I saw the picture of my mother in my mind, her smile, the cotton candy, and I saw the text message. Fallow Dock, $8,000. Running wouldn't save my apartment. Hiding wouldn't save me. It would just guarantee that they won. I wrapped my shaking hands around the hot mug. The ceramic was smooth and solid. It was an anchor in the storm. I took a breath, held it, and let it out. I looked up at Dante Villaro, his form a dark silhouette against the kitchen's warm, yellow light. My fear was still there. It was a cold stone in my stomach. But for the first time, it wasn't just a blind, suffocating panic. It had a name. It had a face. It had an address. And I wasn't going to face it alone. I nodded. The rain had washed New Avalon clean, leaving it bright, brittle, and false in the morning light. The waterfront fair was a riot of primary colors, a desperate attempt to paint over the harbor's decay. Banners snapped in the sea breeze, proclaiming this year's theme, Secure Homes, Secure Hearts. The air smelled of popcorn, spun sugar, and the low-tide saltiness of the bay. Music, tinny and cheerful, piped from speakers mounted on light poles. It was all a lie. I clutched Dante's arm, playing the part. He had given me a soft, knitted beanie to hide my hair and a pair of sunglasses identical to his own. I was just a girl from the tenements, out with her boyfriend on a sunny morning. He wore a plain gray Henley and dark jeans, looking nothing like the man in the wool coat from the night before. He looked normal. But the way he moved, the way his head turned, taking in everything without seeming to look at anything, was not normal. A tiny camera, no bigger than a button, was pinned to the lapel of my borrowed jacket. A digital recorder, slim and cold, was live in my pocket, my hand resting on it. "Just walk," he'd murmured as we left the pickup truck 2 blocks away. "We're curious. We're thinking about our future. We're looking for a home." The irony tasted like acid. We passed the game stalls, a ring toss, a balloon dart game. A line of children was waiting for face painting, and in the center of it all was a large, welcoming pavilion draped in blue and white, the Housing Preservation Fund. This was the trap, dressed up for a party. Then I saw him. Owen. He was wearing a bright blue volunteer t-shirt, stretched tight over his gut. He was beaming, his face slick with a different kind of sweat today, the sweat of self-importance. He was guiding a local reporter, a woman with a notepad, through the crowd. "And this program, it's a godsend," Owen was saying, his voice booming with false charity. "We find folks who've hit a rough patch, maybe a medical bill. You know, the Blue Lantern Union. They sponsor this. They offer a debt forgiveness program. We keep good people in their homes. It's about community." The reporter scribbled dutifully. My fingers dug into Dante's arm. He didn't react. "He's the one," I whispered, my voice tight. "I know," Dante said, his voice placid. He steered me away from Owen, toward the main event. "He's just the salesman. We're here for the bank." The booth was impossible to miss. Harbor Sentinel Bureau, Community Outreach. It was designed to look like a friendly government office. Potted plants, bowls of free candy, smiling volunteers in the same blue shirts as Owen, and a line of people who looked tired, people who looked like my mother had. After her second shift, people clutching envelopes and forms, hope and fear warring on their faces. My breath caught. My feet slowed. This was it. This was the machine that was grinding me up. The panic from the night before, the cold dread from the text message. It all came rushing back. I was going to be sick. Then a hand was on my back. It wasn't a push. It wasn't a caress. It was just contact. His palm, warm through my jacket, rested on the space between my shoulder blades. It was so light it was barely a touch, just enough to let me know he was there. It was a silent, steel anchor. "Breathe, Lyra," he murmured, so low only I could hear. "We're just a couple. Remember worried about our first lease?" His presence steadied me. The hand on my back didn't let me retreat. It guided me forward. We stepped up to the counter, cutting in front of a woman still fumbling with her paperwork. A young man with a bright, plastic smile looked up. "Hi there. Looking to learn about the Housing Preservation Fund?" "We are," Dante said, his voice easy, unremarkable. Gestured around. "It's just, we're new to this. We heard you help people. My fiancé and I, we're trying to find a place, but the deposits are so high." "You've come to the right place," the kid said, launching into his script. "We partner with community-minded lenders, like the Blue Lantern, to guarantee loans for deserving New Avalon residents." "So, it's a loan?" I asked, pitching my voice to sound nervous and small. It wasn't difficult. What if we're late on a payment I get paid weekly? Sometimes my checks are slow." The kid's smile didn't flicker. "Oh, you don't want to be late. The Bureau guarantees the loan, which means they have to protect the community's investment." He leaned in, as if sharing a helpful secret. "There are some steep, asset processing fees upon violation. We have to follow the city charter. And honestly, our priority partners at Blue Lantern, they get first right to recovery. It's just faster that way. Keeps the fund healthy for everyone else." Asset processing fees, priority partners at Blue Lantern. It was the whole scheme, confessed in 30 seconds by a kid who just wanted to get through his shift. I felt the tiny, satisfying vibration of the recorder in my pocket as I depressed the save segment button. We had it. Dante squeezed my arm. "Thanks, that's a lot to think about." We turned to leave, and in my ear, a tiny earpiece Dante had given me, disguised as a hearing aid, hissed, a high-pitched, faint feedback whine. Dante's hand, which had moved from my back to my elbow, tensed. It was the only sign he gave. He didn't look back. He didn't speed up. "We've been made," he said, his voice a flat, conversational tone. Camera frequency just got pinged by a handheld scanner. 2 men, gray jackets, at our 4 o'clock. Don't look. My blood turned to ice. I fought the urge to run, to look over my shoulder. "Walk normal," he commanded. "They won't move on us in the open. They'll try to separate us, push us into an alley." He kept us moving toward the noisiest part of the fair, right past the food stalls. The smell of hot dogs was suddenly nauseating. "The funhouse," he said, nodding toward a garish, painted facade of a smiling whale. "The deep-sea labyrinth. Stay with me." He paid for 2 tickets, his hand steady, and pushed me through the rattling, wooden turnstile. We were plunged into darkness, then into a strobing, blacklit hallway painted with neon jellyfish, distorted. Bubbly music pulsed from hidden speakers. Behind us, I heard the turnstile rattle again. They were in... Dante pulled me to the left, into the hall of mirrors. It was a nightmare. A dozen reflections of me, pale and terrified, stared back. A dozen Dantes, all calm, all watchful, multiplied around us. The music was louder here, a disorienting thrum. "In here," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. He pulled me off the main path into a dark alcove where 2 mirrors met at a sharp angle, creating a pocket of near-total darkness. He backed me against the wall, his body shielding mine, his face so close I could see the faint lines around his eyes behind the sunglasses. I could feel the heat rolling off his chest, smell the clean soap scent from the night before, mixed with the day's salt air. "They'll split up," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. "One will check the main path, one will take the emergency loop. We're going out the side." I could hear footsteps, slow and measured, on the wooden floorboards outside our alcove. My heart was a drum against my ribs, so loud I was sure they could hear it. "There's an emergency exit, painted red, 10 feet from here. On my count," he put his hand on the wall next to my head, leaning in. "When I say 3, you move. Don't stop, don't look back. Got it." I couldn't speak. I just nodded, my eyes locked on his. He watched the reflections. A man in a gray jacket passed, his back to us, then another. "1," he whispered. 2. He grabbed my hand, his grip hard and sure. 3. We weren't running, we were exploding. He shoved us out of the alcove and to the left, not the way we came. I saw a flash of a gray jacket turning in the mirrors, a face distorted and surprised. Then Dante's shoulder hit a red metal bar. An alarm blared, loud and obnoxious. We were out, spilling from the flashing darkness of the maze into the harsh, bright sunlight of a service alley. The noise of the crowd was muffled here. A red pickup truck, old and dented, was parked 20 feet away, engine idling. Marietta. She was at the wheel, sunglasses on, tapping a rhythm on the steering wheel. She looked like she was waiting for a grocery pickup. "Go, go," Dante said, not shouting, his hand on my back, pushing me forward. We scrambled, not even bothering with the doors. Tumbling over the side into the truck's empty bed, we landed hard on a pile of rough burlap sacks that smelled of garlic and dirt. "Hit it!" Mari Dante yelled. Marietta didn't need to be told. The tires squealed on the asphalt. I grabbed the side of the truck bed as we fishtailed out of the alley, throwing me against Dante. We shot out onto the main road, blending into the midday traffic. Behind us, I could hear the funhouse alarm, now joined by the shrill, scattered whistles of fairground security. They were too late. They were all too late. I pushed myself up, my hair flying out of my beanie. I looked back at the bright, cheerful banners of the waterfront fair, getting smaller and smaller, until they were just a colorful lie in the distance. Marietta didn't say a word as we tumbled out of the truck and hustled through the kitchen's back door. She just grunted, followed us in, and immediately began washing her hands as if she just returned from a simple trip to the market. The rest of the kitchen staff, busy prepping for the dinner service, kept their heads down. This was a house of secrets, and I was just the newest one. Dante didn't lead me upstairs. He led me down, through a heavy wooden door off the main pantry and down a flight of narrow stone steps. We entered the wine cellar. It was nothing like the rest of the house. The air was cool, but not cold, and still. It smelled of damp earth, old wood, and the faint, sweet ghost of fermentation. A single, bare bulb with a warm filament cast a low, golden light over everything. Racks of dark bottles stretched away into the shadows. They were covered in a soft gray dust. Sleeping, the rain, which had started again as we drove, was a distant, rhythmic tapping, a whisper against a high grate I couldn't see. Dante shut the heavy door, and the sounds of the kitchen vanished. We were in a pocket of silence, lit like an old painting. I stood in the middle of the floor, and the adrenaline, the terror, the false bravery from the fair, it all evaporated at once. My legs began to shake. It started in my knees and moved up my thighs, an uncontrollable tremor. The camera was gone. The recorder was in Dante's hand, but the fear was still inside me, vibrating. I thought they were going to... I couldn't finish. My hands flew to my mouth, but it was too late to stop the sob that tore its way out. It was a raw, ugly sound. I hated it. I hated being this weak. Dante didn't shush me. He didn't tell me it was okay. He just stood there, watching me, his face impassive in the golden light. He let me have the panic. He took off the dark wool coat he was wearing and draped it over my shoulders. It was heavy. It was so heavy, a physical weight that immediately grounded me. And it was warm. It smelled of him, that clean, sharp scent of soap and wool, and something uniquely his. Like cold air and iron, the scent was enveloping, and the weight of the coat felt like an anchor. My shoulders, which I hadn't realized were hiked up to my ears, dropped an inch. He kept his hands on the coat, on my shoulders, for just a second too long. His fingers, strong and warm, rested on my collarbone. It wasn't a hug. It was a gesture of possession, of protection, a jolt, sharp and warm, shot straight down my spine. It was not a shiver from the cold. I looked up at him, flustered, my breath catching in my throat. We were close, too close, in the cramped aisle between two towering racks of wine. There was nowhere else to be. I could see the individual specks of brown in his dark eyes. My breathing, which had been frantic, was now just gone. I couldn't catch it. "They saw us," I whispered, my voice sounding thin. "They saw your face. They'll know you were with me." They saw a man in sunglasses. They have a recording of a kid at a booth. They don't have a case. They just have a problem. His voice was low, and it vibrated through his hands, through the coat, and into my bones. I can't breathe," I stammered, the panic coming back, clawing at my throat. The small, enclosed space suddenly felt like a trap. "Yes, you can." He didn't move away. He held my gaze. "Stop trying to fight it. Just listen. Listen to what?" The rain. I focused, beyond the blood rushing in my ears. I could hear it, the sound from the grate. Tap, 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 a slow, irregular rhythm. "That's your heartbeat," he said. "It's just the world. It's not your fear. Now, breathe with it. In." He took a slow breath, and I unconsciously mirrored him. Out. We exhaled together. Again, match the rain. It's in no hurry. Neither are you. We stood there, in the dusty, golden light, surrounded by sleeping wine, and we breathed. In, out. I matched my rhythm to the sound of the storm outside. With every breath, one of the sharp, thorny spikes of panic in my chest dissolved. My knees stopped shaking. The air came back into my lungs, cool and earthy. My eyes, which had been locked on his, were clearer now. The film of terror was gone, and I saw him. Really saw him. As I calmed, my gaze dropped to his hand still resting on the coat's lapel, and just below his cuff, on the inside of his wrist. I saw it, a thin, white line against his olive skin. It was an old scar, pale and smooth. Without thinking, my hand, which had been clenched at my side, came up. I didn't ask. I just touched it. My fingers, still cold, brushed against the scar. It was a small, intimate gesture, a question asked without words. He didn't pull away. He went very still. "What happened?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He looked down at my fingers on his wrist. His expression was distant, his eyes fixed on a memory I couldn't see. "A fire," he said, his voice flat. "A long time ago. My family's first apartment. I was 12. He paused. My brother, he was still inside, in his room. I went back for him, pulled him out through a broken window." His voice was calm, a simple statement of facts, but I could see the truth beneath it, the smoke, the heat, the terror of a 12-year-old boy. He wasn't just a boss. He wasn't just a shadow. He was a man who ran back into burning buildings. My fingers traced the line, a silent act of empathy. This was why he'd stopped for me. This was why he hated people who used fear. He knew what real fear felt like. His other hand came up and covered mine, the one still on his wrist. His grip wasn't a trap. It wasn't a restraint. It was just a hold, a warm, firm pressure that said, "I am here." The temperature in the cellar, which had been cool, suddenly felt intensely warm. The air between us was charged, thick and still. The single golden bulb seemed to shrink, pulling all the light in the world into the few inches of space separating our faces. We were alone. Breathing in the scent of dust and rain and each other. He leaned his head down, slowly. I could feel his breath, warm and clean, ghosting across my cheek. He was giving me every second, every chance to pull away, to turn my head, to say no. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I waited. His lips touched mine. It was not a collision. It was not a spark. It was the slowest, most tentative kiss I could have ever imagined. It was a question. It was just the barest, softest pressure, a whisper of contact. He paused, asking for permission. I let out the breath I was holding, and that was my answer. My shoulders, heavy with his coat, finally relaxed completely. My hand, the one he wasn't holding, came up and rested on his chest. I could feel his heart, a steady, solid beat beneath my palm. Then my fingers crept up, tracing the line of his jaw. It was rough, stubbled from the day. His hand left my wrist and slid to the back of my neck, his fingers tangling in the soft hair at my nape. He tilted my head, and his mouth met mine again. This time, there was no hesitation. It was slow, and it was deep, and it was devastatingly gentle. It wasn't a kiss of passion, not yet. It was a kiss of recognition, of safety. It was a promise. My lips parted under his, and I responded, my body, which had been coiled tight with fear for 24 hours, finally letting go. He was the one who broke it. He pulled back, but only an inch, just enough so our lips were no longer touching. He rested his forehead against mine. His eyes were closed. "Sei al sicuro," he whispered, the Italian words a soft rumble against my skin. "You are safe." A small, shaky laugh escaped me. It was a sound of pure relief. I felt his mouth curve into a smile against my skin. He opened his eyes. His gaze was dark, intense, and all the coldness was gone, replaced by a raw, quiet warmth that stunned me. "I won't use you as bait." "Lyra," he said, his voice rough, "I meant what I said last night. I'm not them. We're not going to leak that recording to scare them. If we fight with the truth. All of it." I nodded, my forehead still pressed to his. The truth. I felt a sudden, crushing wave of exhaustion, the adrenaline crash, the lack of sleep, the emotional whiplash of the last 2 days. I didn't move away from his warmth. I just shifted. My head finding the solid plane of his chest, I let my cheek rest there, right over his heart. His arms came around me, pulling me in, holding me loosely inside the heavy wool coat. I closed my eyes. The cellar was dark. The world outside was raining. But in here, I was listening to his heartbeat. It was slow. It was steady. Thump, 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 thump. It was the same rhythm as the rain. It was the only sound in the world. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I had found a place to come back to. The intimacy of the wine cellar, the feel of his forehead against mine, faded the moment we climbed the stone steps. The warmth, the safety, the illusion that the world had shrunk to just the two of us, evaporated. He had kept me safe. Now, he was going to show me why. He led me through the bustling kitchen, past Marietta, who gave him a sharp nod, and up a flight of service stairs I hadn't seen. At the top was a heavy, steel-plated door hidden behind a faded tapestry of an Italian hillside. He pressed his thumb to a small, dark panel, and a lock clicked open with an expensive, solid sound. This was not part of the restaurant. The room we entered was the brain of the Villaro syndicate. It was dark, cooled by the hum of electronics. The only light came from a wall of glowing monitors, displaying security feeds, data streams, and encrypted chat windows. 3 people were already there, and they didn't look up when we entered. They weren't thugs. They were analysts. A young man, pale and wired, sat at the main console, his fingers a blur across 3 keyboards. A woman with severe black glasses and a lawyer's pinstripe suit. Morel was reading a document, her face grim. And Ardo, the driver who had brought me here, stood by the door, his arms crossed, a silent mountain. This was the Civetta, the owls. "She's in," Dante said, and the room's quiet energy shifted, focusing on me. On the far wall, a projector lit up, displaying a massive, detailed map of New Avalon's Port District. "This is where we are," Dante said. He picked up a laser pointer. A red dot appeared on the map. Port K, a series of warehouses. Officially, they are derelict, condemned, useless. He clicked a button. A complex diagram of bank accounts and shell corporations flooded the screen. Unofficially, they are the collateral for the Blue Lantern Union. The money they squeeze from people like you, Lyra, doesn't just disappear. It's funneled into the Housing Preservation Fund. He clicked again. The smiling, handsome face of a man in a crisp suit appeared. The name below it read City Commissioner Halden Crow. Crow controls the Harbor Sentinel Bureau. The Bureau gives legal cover to the Union's collection tactics. The Union seizes the properties. The properties are then sold in closed-door auctions to developers, who just happen to own the Port K warehouses. The money washes clean. Crow gets his cut. The developers get the city, and the people get evicted. It was so simple, so clean, so big. Morel, the lawyer, finally spoke, her voice as sharp as her suit. "It's a perfect loop. We've been tracking the money for a year, but the link was missing. We had the finance, but not the mechanism. We didn't know how they were choosing the targets." Dante looked at me. "Then you dropped a plate." The pale analyst at the console, who hadn't spoken, slid a laptop toward me. "These are the digital files from the waterfront fair. We pulled their servers' cache while you were in the funhouse. These are the intake forms for the Housing Preservation Fund from the last 2 years." I sat down, my hands suddenly steady. The fear was gone. In the wine cellar, I had been a victim, finding comfort in this room, surrounded by data. I was a witness. I started scrolling. It was a nightmare. Names, addresses, families, all from Pier 19, from my neighborhood, all with impossible debts. And then I saw the signatures. Not just mine, dozens of them, all forged, all with the same looping, lazy handwriting. And on the processing line, the community liaison who had approved every single one. "Owen," I said, the name tasted like ash. "It's him. He signed all of them." My voice didn't tremble. I wasn't the girl who had cried in the cellar. I was angry. A cold, quiet, precise anger that I had never felt before. I had learned how to run. I had learned how to hide. I had never learned how to hate. I was learning now. "He wasn't just my manager," I said, looking up at Dante. "He was their scout. He found the people who were struggling. He signed them up. He forged their names." He gave them the mechanism, Dante finished. The analyst spoke, his voice tense. It's worse. They're accelerating. We just intercepted a bureau-wide memo. They are launching their abandoned property recovery campaign, effective tonight. My stomach went cold. Tonight. Dante's eyes met mine. They were dark and steady. Their first target? They need a flagship case to prove the campaign is necessary. They're making an example of the worst-case tenant. Me, I whispered. Pier 19. They'll move in at midnight, the analyst said, typing. They're calling it an emergency infrastructure inspection to justify cutting power to the block. They'll clear the building. By morning, it will be condemned, and you'll be the delinquent they rescued from an unsafe building. The story will write itself. Then we write our own, Dante said. He turned to the team. Morel. Already filed, she said, holding up a thick document. A class action injunction on behalf of a dozen anonymous Pier 19 residents. It alleges predatory lending, massive fraud, and civil rights violations. The second they set foot in that building, Crow is in violation of a federal restraining order. It will slow them, but it won't stop them, Dante said. They'll claim it's a public safety issue. We need to cut off the head. Ardo. I'm driving, Ardo said. She's in, she's out. Marietta is handling logistics, Dante added. She'll have a fire in a dumpster 3 blocks away to pull the first responders. It will buy us a window. He then looked at me. They're starting this fire because of you. Lyra, you're the ghost they're hunting. It's time they heard you. What? What do you want me to do? The analyst is patching into Town Square. It's an independent, decentralized news platform. They can't shut it down. The second the Bureau cuts the power at Pier 19, our generators will kick on, and we go live. You're going to sit in front of a camera in your own apartment, and you are going to tell the entire city your story. The broken plate, the $14, the forged signature. Owen, the fake debt. You will show them the documents. You will show them the faces. You will be the truth they can't bury. The risk was a living thing in the room. The analyst spoke. There's a problem, boss. The Blue Lanterns don't just have security. They have a mobile inspection team. It's a van, full of signal jamming equipment. If they pinpoint our broadcast signal before we're done, they'll cut us off the air. Dante's face was stone. And if we get cut off mid-broadcast, before the truth is out, Halden Crow will have everything he needs. He'll use the Bureau's private police to raid the building, claiming the Valaro syndicate was inciting a violent riot. He'll be a hero, and we'll all be in a cage. The room was silent. Everyone was looking at me. I was the plan. I was the risk. I was the fuse. Dante walked over, standing between me and the rest of the team. He lowered his voice, creating a small pocket of silence just for us. Just like in the cellar. No one is forcing you to do this. Lyra, you didn't ask for this war. You can walk out of this room. You can take the money I gave the diner and disappear. I will have Ardo drive you anywhere you want to go. If you say stop, I stop. We find another way. He was offering me an escape. The girl I was 2 days ago, the one who hid from Owen in the walk-in freezer, would have taken it. She would have run so fast. But I wasn't that girl. That girl died when the plate broke. I looked up at him, at the man who had seen me at my weakest and hadn't turned away. I thought of my mother's photograph by the bed they were about to steal. I thought of all the other names on that list. Where is the other way? Dante, I asked, my voice quiet, but it didn't shake. If I run, they still win. They just win quietly. They're taking my home. They're taking my mother's memory. I met his gaze, and for the first time, I wasn't just someone he was protecting. I was his equal. If you are there, I said, I won't back down. A slow, dangerous smile touched the corner of his mouth. He didn't say a word. He just put his hand on the table, palm up. A silent offering, a contract. I placed my hand in his. His skin was warm, his grip was firm. It wasn't a promise of safety. It was a promise of loyalty. We held it for a beat. Then, at the same moment, We both pulled our hands away. We both knew. The time for hiding was over. It was midnight. The rain had returned. Not a storm, but a fine, cold mist that clung to everything, slicking the streets of Pier 19 until they shone like black glass. The air was heavy with the smell of the low tide and old, wet brick. I wasn't in my apartment. I was on the roof of my building, 4 stories up, exposed to the night. Ardo was with me. He moved with a quiet, brutal efficiency, unpacking equipment from a reinforced case, a small, muffled generator, a laptop, a broadcast-quality camera on a tripod, and a portable uplink dish, aimed at the sky. This was the new trap. I looked down at the street. My street, it was dark. Too dark. Then I saw them. 2 large, white vans, their headlights off, slid to a stop at the end of the block. They weren't marked Blue Lantern. They were marked Harbor Sentinel Bureau, official. Men in dark blue uniforms, not suits, spilled out, carrying flashlights and clipboards. They wore bright blue armbands that read Inspector. A loudspeaker crackled to life, the sound echoing harshly off the brick tenements. "This is the Harbor Sentinel Bureau. By order of the city. This building is scheduled for emergency infrastructure maintenance. All residents must evacuate immediately." The lie was so bold it stole my breath. Windows slid open below. My neighbors, sleepy and confused, leaned out. "What's going on?" someone yelled. "This is a mandatory safety inspection," the loudspeaker boomed. "Please exit in an orderly fashion." I saw him. Owen. He wasn't in a volunteer shirt. He was in one of the blue uniforms, an armband stretched tight on his thick arm. He was directing them, pointing at my building. He looked up, his eyes scanning the windows, and I flinched back from the roof's ledge. He gave a sharp signal, a slicing motion at his throat, and the lights went out. Not just in my building, the entire block, a collective. Frightened gasp rose from the street as Pier 19 was plunged into total darkness, lit only by the weak beams of the inspector's flashlights. "Now," Ardo grunted. He hit the switch on the generator. It hummed to life, a sound no louder than a high-end dishwasher. A second later, a string of battery-powered LED lights, the kind used for outdoor patios, buzzed on, strung around our rooftop setup. We were a small, defiant island of light in the sudden dark. People in the streets saw us. A few pointed. "What's that?" "In my ear," the analyst's voice. Kestrel was cold and clear. "They cut the grid. We're on our own power. The feed is live. Town Square is pushing the notification. We have 5,000 viewers. Lyra, go." Ardo aimed the camera. The small red light glowed, an eye in the dark. My hands were shaking. I gripped the wet metal of the tripod to steady them. I looked straight into the lens. "My name is Lyra. I live here in this building." My voice was thin, but the microphone was good. 2 days ago, I was a waitress at the Red Harbor Diner. I was fired by my manager, Owen, because I dropped a plate. He said I owed him for it. Down below, Owen froze. He looked up, his face a pale oval in the gloom, trying to process the sound of my voice, the sudden light. "I had $14, I continued, my voice gaining strength. I had no job. And then men from the Blue Lantern Union told me I owed them thousands for a loan for my mother's funeral, a loan I never signed." Kestrel's voice was in my ear, pushing the data. I pointed at the laptop screen. Ardo turned toward the camera. "This is the agreement they sent me, and this is my real signature. They don't match. They forged it." The feed on the laptop split, my face on one side, the forged document on the other. "My manager, Owen, the man in the uniform down there, he's the one who signed me up for the fake loan. He did this to dozens of us. He's their scout. He finds people who are desperate, and he sells them to the Harbor Sentinel Bureau." Kestrel was a machine. As I spoke, the data flooded the screen. Bank statements, account transfers, arrowing from the Blue Lantern Union to anonymous shell companies, and from those shells to a single fund, the Housing Preservation Fund, and from that fund, a line, clear and sharp, to a final name. "Halden Crow," I said, my voice ringing with a cold fury I didn't know I possessed. City Commissioner Halden Crow. This isn't maintenance. This isn't safety. This is theft. He's using your taxes to hire these men to steal our homes." The town square chat feed was a waterfall of rage. Names: Halden Crow, Owen, thief. "We have a problem." Kestrel's voice snapped in my ear. "Signal interference. Strong, they're here. The jammer van. They're triangulating. 50 meters north of you, in the alley." I saw Dante then. I hadn't known where he was, when he was on the street, standing in the shadows across from my building. He was on his own comms. He looked up at me, nodded once, then turned and melted into the alley. "He sees them," Kestrel said. "He's drawing them out." "Ardo," Dante's voice crackled, faint in my earpiece. "They're taking the bait, headed for the old fish market. Be ready." "Ardo," I whispered, my eyes on the camera. "Keep talking, Lyra," Ardo said. He was already moving to the roof door. "Tell them about the text message." He was gone. I was alone on the roof. My heart was slamming. The generator hummed. The camera's red light was my only anchor. They sent me a text," I said, forcing the words out. "They told me to bring $8,000 to Fallow Dock, or I'd lose my home." I heard it before I saw it, a screech of tires from the street below, followed by a sickening, heavy crunch of metal collapsing and the shatter of glass. Kestrel's voice was sharp with triumph. "Jammer van is neutralized. Ardo pinned it between his truck and the market loading dock. They're not going anywhere. Broadcast is stable. Keep going, Lyra." But the noise had drawn new attention. The door to the roof, the one Ardo had just disappeared through, burst open. It was Owen. His face was a mask of livid, purple rage. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at me. "You!" he bellowed. The sound ripped from his throat. He saw the laptop, the dish. He understood. "You worthless little—" He lunged, not at me, at the camera, to destroy the feed. A shadow moved faster. Dante. He was on the roof. He must have come up the fire escape on the other side. He didn't run. He just stepped, planting himself between Owen and the camera. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't get in a fighting stance. He just stood there, a wall. "Get out of my way," Valaro Owen roared, his authority, his life, crumbling in front of his eyes. He shoved Dante, a hard, two-handed push to the chest. Dante didn't budge, and he was rooted to the roof. He just looked at Owen, his face calm in the glare of the LEDs, and he gestured, almost politely, to the camera I was cowering behind. "Smile, Owen," Dante said, his voice perfectly clear, perfectly amplified by my microphone. "The entire city is watching you." Owen froze. His eyes darted from Dante to the red light, the realization, the sheer, catastrophic scale of his mistake washed over his face. From the street below, a voice yelled up, "We see you! You thief! Leave her alone!" It was Mrs. Petrov from apartment 3. She was tiny, old, and she was standing at the base of the fire escape, her phone held up, recording her own video. Owen, trapped between Dante, the camera, and the angry shouts from below, snapped. He was a cornered animal. He looked down, his face contorted. "Shut up, you old hag." He kicked, not at Dante. He kicked at the railing of the fire escape, a furious, blind act of rage. The rusted metal shuddered. Mrs. Petrov, startled, stumbled backward, her feet tangling. She fell, hard, onto the wet pavement. A collective scream rose from the street. It was over. That one petty, violent act did more damage than all our data. The crowd, which had been confused, was now a mob, the other inspectors in their blue uniforms, seeing Owen assault an old woman, seeing the phones all pointed at them, dropped their clipboards. They broke ranks, backing away, ripping off their armbands. They weren't bureau men. They were just hired muscle, and the job was no longer worth the paycheck. Owen was alone, defeated. But in my ear, Kestrel's voice was ice. "Lyra, Dante, we have a new problem, a big one. Halden Crow just made a move. He's not using the bureau. He's activated the Metro Civic Wardens. He's on the official city channel, issuing a citywide alert for Dante." "On what charge?" Dante asked, his voice low, pulling Owen away from the ledge. Organizing a criminal enterprise, inciting a public riot, aggravated assault? Kestrel's voice was grim. Dante, they're not coming to talk. They're coming to arrest you. Now. The escape from Pier 19 was a blur. Ardo drove with a terrifying, calm precision. The truck's engine screaming through the back alleys of the Port District, every turn calculated to avoid the main arteries where the Metro Civic wardens would be setting up. Dante was silent beside me in the cab, his face a mask of stone, his eyes on the city lights, already calculating. We didn't go in the back door. Ardo pulled into a subterranean garage I never knew existed, and we entered Casa Sorelia through the wine cellar. The moment we stepped into the kitchen, the chaos of the night hit us. Marietta was there, along with Morel and Kestrel, the analyst, the kitchen. Usually a place of warm smells and steady work, was a command center in disarray. A small television in the corner was blaring a local news feed, already showing grainy cell phone footage from the riot. Halden Crow's official portrait was on the screen. Next to a photo of Dante, a grainy, older picture that made him look like a common criminal. "They're painting you as a mob boss, Dante," Morel said, not a hint of panic in her voice. "Just grim fact. They're using the full power of the city charter. They've locked down the port. They're positioning wardens at every major intersection." Kestrel looked up from his laptop, his face pale. "The town square feed is viral. We have over 100,000 active viewers, but the official news is spinning it. They're calling you a disgruntled tenant and Dante your syndicate handler. They're saying you incited the violence." My stomach turned to ice. This was my fault. I had stepped onto that roof. I had spoken. And in doing so, I had brought the entire weight of the city down on the only man who had helped me. I was a burden. I was a liability. I was the stone he had tied around his own neck. "I'll fix it," I said, my voice too loud in the tense room. Everyone looked at me. "I'll turn myself in," I said, the words tasting like poison. "I'll go to the wardens. I'll tell them it was all me, that I tricked you, that I lied. If they have me, they'll have to stop hunting you." Dante, who'd been staring at the television, turned his head. His movement was slow, deliberate. He looked at me, and his eyes were flat. All the warmth from the cellar gone, replaced by something cold and hard. "No," he said, one word. It was not a suggestion. It was a command that echoed with absolute finality. "But they want me," I argued, desperation making my voice shake. "This is all because of my apartment, my signature. If I surrender, the crisis stops. You'll be safe. You can't fight the whole city, Dante." "You will not surrender," he said. "You will not hand them their victory. You will not, ever, go to them. That is the end of this discussion." "You don't get to decide that for me," I shot back. "The injustice of it all, the unfairness, making me reckless. You don't get to be a martyr for a waitress you met 2 days ago. I won't let you. This stopped being about your apartment when Crow put my face on that television," he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "This is his move. Now I make mine." The argument hung in the air, hot and bitter. Morel and Kestrel looked away, pretending to be absorbed in their screens. Marietta just stirred a pot of sauce that didn't need stirring. The rhythmic scrape of the wooden spoon against the copper pot, the only sound. The tension was suffocating. I couldn't breathe. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, pushing through the swinging door into the dining room. It was dark. The tables were set for a breakfast service that would never happen, their white cloths like ghosts in the gloom. The only light was the cold, blue-white light of the moon, filtering through the front windows, slicing across the polished wooden floor. The rain was lashing against the glass. Harder now. A furious, driving rhythm. I heard his footsteps behind me. The door swung shut, leaving us in the dark. Silent room, alone. The sounds of the kitchen were gone. There was only the rain and the sound of our breathing. "You think you're a burden," he said. It wasn't a question. He was standing right behind me. I could feel the heat of him, the barely controlled energy. "I am a burden," I whispered. turning to face him. "Look at this. Your home, your family, your entire life. It's all on fire. Because of me. Because you were foolish enough to pay for my broken plate." "It was never about the plate." "Then what was it about? Why are you doing this?" My voice cracked. "Why are you willing to lose everything for me?" "Who said I'm losing?" The arrogance of it, the simple, unshakable certainty, broke something inside me. The fear, the gratitude, the anger, the confusion, it all coalesced into one raw, desperate emotion. "Stop it," I cried, and I hit him, my fists, balled up, slammed against his chest. It was like hitting a brick wall. It didn't hurt him. It just hurt me. "Stop trying to protect everyone. Stop taking all of this on yourself. Don't you see you're just one man? You can't carry all of it." I hit him again, a useless, frantic drumming. "Don't carry me, too." He caught my wrists. His grip was instant, strong, and absolute. He didn't hurt me. He just held. He stopped the storm. "Lyra," he said my name, and it stilled me. He took my right hand, the one I'd been hitting him with, and uncurled my fist, finger by finger. He flattened my palm and pressed it against his chest, right over his heart. Thump, 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 thump. It wasn't fast. It wasn't panicked. It was slow, steady, and incredibly strong. It was the rhythm of the man in the wine cellar. It was the calm in the center of the hurricane. He was furious. He was at war. But he was not afraid. The rain hammered the windows, a wild counterpoint to the steady beat beneath my palm. "This is not panic," he said, his voice a low rumble that I felt in my hand as much as I heard with my ears. "This is focus. I am not carrying you. You are with me. There is a difference." I looked up at him. The moonlight caught the sharp line of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes. The kiss that happened in the wine cellar was a question. This one was the answer. I didn't wait. I stood on my toes, my free hand coming up to circle his neck, and I pulled his mouth down to mine. There was no hesitation. It was not gentle. It was desperate, and it was raw, and it was acclaiming. It was all the fear and anger of the night, transmuted into a different kind of fire. It was a kiss that said, "I am here. I am not glass. I will not break." He responded instantly, his other arm wrapped around me, his hand splaying wide across my lower back, pulling me tight against him until there was no space, no air between us. His lips were firm, demanding, and he kissed me back with a possessive energy that matched my own. His hand slid from my back, moving up my spine, tracing each vertebra through the thin fabric of my shirt. It was not a sexual touch. It was a touch of inventory. He was mapping me, learning me, assuring himself I was real. His fingers stopped at my waist. He didn't move lower. He didn't cross a line. He just held me, his grip tightening, a silent promise that he would not let me fall. I pulled back, just enough to breathe, just enough to see his face. Our foreheads touched. His eyes were dark, as deep and wild as the harbor at night. A shaky laugh, half a sob, escaped me. "I'm not afraid anymore. When I'm with you, I'm just not." He closed his eyes for a second, as if my words were a physical blow. He brought his hand up to my face, his thumb tracing the line of my cheekbone. "Sei al sicuro," he whispered, the Italian words a vow in the darkness. "You are safe." I wanted to be closer. I wanted to erase the last, tiny bit of distance between us. I leaned in and pressed a chain of small, soft kisses along the sharp, stubbled line of his jaw. Each one was a period at the end of a sentence. "I am here. I am with you. I am yours." A sound, a low groan, vibrated in his chest. He turned his head, capturing my mouth again, but this time, his arm clamped around me, and he lifted me, turning us both, backing me against a solid oak pillar until I was trapped between the cold wood and his warm, hard body. He was careful, his movements precise even in his passion, maneuvering me away from the sharp corner of a nearby dining table. He was protecting me even now. The heat was instantaneous. It was a flash fire, climbing from my stomach, spreading through my limbs. This was it. This was the point of no return. His mouth was on my neck, his lips tracing a hot path, and my head fell back against the pillar. Then, just as the fire was about to consume everything, he stopped. He pulled back, his breath coming hard. He was still holding me, but he had created an inch of space. He was looking at me, his eyes burning, and he was asking, without a single word, he was asking for a permission that I was desperate to give. I nodded, my breath catching. And then I smiled, a real, genuine smile in the middle of the chaos. The fire didn't vanish, but it settled, sinking from a raging inferno to a steady, glowing ember. I placed my hand on his chest, over his heart, just as he had done for me. It was still beating that same steady rhythm. "Save it," I whispered, my voice no longer shaking. "Save it for the sunrise. We still have to win." He stared at me for a long second, his expression unreadable. Then, the tension in his shoulders broke, and he let out a short, sharp laugh. He buried his face in my neck, his body shaking with silent laughter. "Okay, Lyra," he murmured against my skin, his voice thick. "We win. Then, the sunrise." He pulled back, his face all business once more, but his eyes were bright, the fire still banked there, waiting. The promise was made. The passion hadn't been extinguished. It had been focused. It was fuel. He took my hand, his grip warm and strong, and led me out of the dark dining room, back toward the light of the kitchen, and back to the war. We were back in the kitchen for less than 5 minutes when Kestrel's head snapped up from his laptop. "He's moving," he said, his voice sharp. "Crow isn't just defending, he's consolidating. We just got an insider tip. A doc manifest was just altered. They're not destroying the evidence. They're moving all of Halden Crow's offshore ledgers, the real ones, from his office to a secure location." "Where?" Dante's voice was low, all the laughter from the dining room gone. "Cold Storage 47, Kestrel said, pulling up a schematic. "It's deep in the port, Blue Lantern territory, but the manifest is authorized for inspection by the Harbor Sentinel Bureau. They're hiding the hard drives in plain sight, in a place no one would ever be stupid enough to raid." "They're not expecting us tonight," Morel said, her eyes bright. "They think they have you pinned. Dante, they're arrogant." "Good." Dante looked at me, then at Morel. "The Chivetta splits, 2 teams. Morel, Lyra, you're our way in." "What?" I said, my voice failing me. "They'll be watching the perimeter for Ardo. For me," Dante explained, his focus absolute. "They're looking for muscle. They are not looking for a lawyer and a waitress. The Port Authority office is 2 buildings over from the cold storage. It's all automated. You'll go in as cleaning staff, and Morel will hack the terminal." Morel nodded, already pulling a laptop from her bag. "We'll print a new work order. An emergency internal inspection for Unit 47. We'll walk right in the front door. We'll be the inspectors." "While you do that," Dante said, looking at Ardo, "we'll give them the muscle they're looking for. We'll draw their security to the east gate." It was insane. It was brilliant. 20 minutes later, I was walking through the driving rain, pushing a janitorial cart. My hair was tucked under a cheap baseball cap, and I was wearing a gray jumpsuit that smelled of bleach. Morel was beside me, dressed the same, her face a mask of bored annoyance. We looked the part. We passed the main security checkpoint. A single, sleepy Blue Lantern guard waved us through, not even looking up from his phone. We were invisible. The port office was a small, prefab building, brightly lit and empty. Morel sat at the main terminal, her fingers flying, a quiet string of code scrolling across the screen. I stood by the door, my heart hammering, acting as the lookout. "Almost," Morel murmured. "Their firewall is cheap. Got it. Printing now." A network printer in the corner whirred to life. Well, look what the storm washed in. My blood went cold. I turned slowly. Owen. He was standing in the doorway, blocking our only exit. He wasn't in uniform. He was in a soaked suit, his hair plastered to his skull, his face a mask of triumphant rage. I knew it, he sneered, stepping into the room. I knew you were part of this. Vallaro's little rat. Get out of our way, Owen, I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. Or what, you'll drop a plate on me? He laughed, a wet, ugly sound. He pulled out his phone. I don't think so. I've got a little insurance policy. I was filming. You see, after you ran off the roof, I got this perfect little clip. He turned the screen. It was grainy. Dark footage from a side alley. It showed me getting into Ardo's truck, and it showed Dante leaning in, passing me a thick envelope of cash, a payoff, a lie, cut and spliced from a moment I didn't even remember. You're gonna get on that live stream of yours, Owen hissed, taking a step closer. And you're going to tell them you lied. You're going to say you made it all up for the money Vallaro paid you. You do that, and I'll forget I ever saw you here. I looked at the phone, at the lie. I thought of the girl in the diner, the one who would have dissolved into tears. I looked at Owen's smug, desperate face, and I felt nothing but a cold, hard clarity. No, I said. His smile faltered. What? Go ahead, publish it, I said, taking a step toward him. Morel had the printed inspection order in her hand, her eyes wide. Release that video, please, because the entire city is going to watch it, and they're all going to ask the same question. Why would Dante Vallaro need to pay me off? Why would a girl who just got fired over one $10 broken plate, a girl with $14 to her name, suddenly be the center of a massive conspiracy? They'll ask what you and Owen and Halden Crow were so terrified of that you had to silence me. His face went pale. The logic of it hit him like a physical blow. He had no power. The fear he used as currency was worthless. He stammered. His bluff called. Morel didn't wait. She shoved the clipboard with the fake order into my hand and sprayed a bottle of industrial cleaner directly into Owen's eyes. He screamed, clutching his face, and Morel slammed her shoulder into his chest, sending him crashing back into the hallway. Run! Lyra, go. We ran. We didn't look back. At the same time, 2 miles east, a fuel tanker exploded. A bright orange flower bloomed in the night sky. Ardo's diversion. Alarms blared across the port. Men were shouting, running toward the fire. We ran the other way, toward Cold Storage 47. Dante was already inside. He had used the diversion to slip past the main patrol. The storage unit was a vast, freezing cavern, the air thick with the smell of ammonia and ice. He found the safe, tucked behind a pallet of frozen fish. It was a simple tumbler. He had it open in less than 30 seconds. Inside, sitting on a velvet cloth, was a single, silver hard drive. He picked it up. The massive roll-up door slammed shut, plunging the room into darkness. Then, a dozen high-powered floodlights snapped on, blinding him. Men, at least 10 of them, swarmed from between the shelves. They weren't Blue Lantern thugs. They were dressed in black tactical gear, with vests that read, Interagency Task Force. They were Crow's private, fake police. Dante Vallaro, one of them shouted, his voice amplified. You are under arrest for domestic terrorism and conspiracy? Dante didn't move. He didn't fight. He just stood there, bathed in the white light, the hard drive in his hand. He slowly, deliberately, raised his hands. My lawyer will want to see the warrant. We have an executive order, the agent sneered. No number, just a mandate. He didn't see us. Morel and I had found the observation booth on the 2nd floor, the one that controlled the warehouse floor. Morel locked the door and plugged her laptop into the control console. They cut the main comms, she said, her voice tight. But they can't cut the hard line, not inside the building. What are you doing? Fighting with the truth, Morel said, and her fingers flew. Down on the floor, the lead agent was pulling out a pair of handcuffs, a smug look on his face. And then, my voice, amplified by the building-wide public address system, blasted through the warehouse. My name is Lyra. I live on Pier 19. The agents froze. Dante looked up, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. By order of the Harbor Sentinel Bureau, my voice echoed, cold and clear. This building is scheduled for emergency infrastructure maintenance. All residents must evacuate. I was playing the recording from the rooftop, the lie, the threat. Outside the warehouse, on the main docks, the chaos from the fire slowed. Dock workers, hunkered down from the rain, looked up at the PA speakers. They heard the threats. They heard Owen's voice. They heard Mrs. Petrov's scream. They stopped working. They pulled out their phones, hundreds of them. The entire port, which had been a place of shadows, became a sea of small, red recording lights, all aimed at the locked-down warehouse. The walls were no longer a prison. They were a stage. Owen, recovered and panicked, must have followed us. He burst into the control room, his face a mask of terror. He saw the hard drive in Dante's hand, saw the agents, and he saw the dock workers outside. He knew it was over. He saw the backup drive, the one Morel had been about to grab. Sitting in the server rack, he snatched it and ran, shoving past me. "He has the backup," I yelled. I ran after him, out of the booth, onto the high metal catwalk that ran above the container platform. The rain was sheeting in through the open loading bay. Owen was clumsy, desperate. He scrambled over a pile of pallets. I was faster. I was on his heels. I reached for him, my fingers brushing his soaked jacket. My foot slipped. The metal was slick with rain and ice from the warehouse. I went down, sliding, my body skidding toward the edge of the platform, toward the dark, churning water 20 feet below. I screamed. A body slammed into me. It wasn't Owen. It was Dante. He had broken free in the confusion. He lunged, his arm hooking around my waist, his boots finding purchase just inches from the edge. He pulled me back, his grip like a steel band crushing the air from my lungs. He had me. I was safe. But Owen was getting away. Dante didn't let me go. He held me tight to his chest with one arm. With his other, he ripped a heavy, curved cargo hook from a worker's belt on the wall. He didn't aim. He just threw. The hook spun, end over end, and lodged itself in the front wheel of a heavy cargo dolly Owen was trying to push past. The wheel locked. The dolly's handle slammed into Owen's chest, and he went down, hard, the hard drive skittering across the wet metal. The fake agents, their authority shattered by the PA system, and the hundreds of witnesses, swarmed up the catwalk. They surrounded Dante, who was still holding me. "Hands up, on your knees now," they screamed, their professionalism gone, replaced by panic. One of them raised his weapon. A deafening horn blast echoed from the main gate. The entire dock lit up, not with floodlights, but with the high beams of a dozen vehicles, news vans, Channel 5, Channel 7, New Avalon Post, and the Town Square Independent crew. Kestrel had called them all. The gate, already damaged by Ardo, was shoved open. The media flooded in, cameras rolling, broadcasting live. The agents froze, their guns pointed at Dante, at me, all of it caught on live television. And then a single black sedan pushed through the chaos. It stopped. Halden Crow stepped out. His face was a mask of cold, political fury. He had come to control the narrative, to announce the capture of a terrorist. He saw the cameras. He saw the dock workers, all watching, all recording. He saw Dante, and he saw me. I pulled away from Dante's arms, my legs shaking, but I did not fall. I walked over and picked up the silver hard drive Owen had dropped. I turned, and I walked past the frozen agents, past Halden Crow, and I stopped in front of the brightest camera. My hair was soaked. My face was streaked with grime, but my hand was steady. "My name is Lyra," I said, my voice clear. "I'm the waitress he tried to evict over a broken plate." I held the hard drive up, high, for the entire city to see. "This is our city. This is our home. It is not a warehouse for your fear." Behind me, from the hundreds of dock workers gathered in the rain, came a sound, a low rumbling, then a roar. They were cheering. They were shouting. The wall of silence had been broken. Halden Crow stood in the glare of the news lights, his face a mask of iron, his political career evaporating live on camera. He was trapped, but he was still a commissioner. He made his last, desperate play. "That hard drive is stolen city property," he bellowed, pointing a shaking finger at me, then at Dante. "This is an organized attack on our city's infrastructure. These are terrorists. Seize him. Seize Dante Villaro." The fake tactical agents, the ones in the black vests, looked at each other. They were caught between Crow's order and the hundreds of cell phone cameras recording their every move. They looked at the real media. They were mercenaries, not martyrs. Hesitantly, they began to close the circle around Dante. Dante didn't look at them. He looked at me. His face was calm, but his eyes were dark with 1,000 calculations. He leaned in, his voice a whisper, meant only for me, his breath warm in the cold, wet air. "If I go in, Lyra, don't wait for me. Take Morel. Disappear." I looked at this man who had walked into my life over a broken plate. He was willing to be caged to ensure I was free. The girl he'd met in the diner would have run. I did not run. I put my hand on his arm, my grip firm. I looked at Halden Crow, at the cameras, at the agents. "No one is going anywhere," I said, my voice clear and carrying in the night air. "He's right," a new voice boomed, amplified. It was Morel. She was still in the control room, but she had done more than just play the audio. She had patched the hard drive directly into the town square live stream. On the phones of every dock worker, on the laptops of every reporter, the truth was now playing. Not just audio, video, data. A new feed appeared on their screens, a spreadsheet, a shadow payroll for the Blue Lantern Union, showing dates, names, and cash amounts. "As you can see," Morel's voice narrated, cold and precise, "the Blue Lantern Union is not a community fund. It is a private, salaried collection agency, and their salaries are paid by, The screen changed. A new document, a scanned deed, the charitable donation of the Port K warehouses to the city. A deed that released the properties for private development, signed, dated, and authorized by one person. Halden Crow. A collective gasp went up from the crowd. The reporters were no longer asking questions. They were shouting accusations. "Commissioner Crow, is that your signature? Are you on the payroll? Halden." The agents in the black vests stopped. They looked at Crow, their faces pale. They were on live TV, executing an illegal arrest for a man who had just been exposed as a fraud. Their leader spoke. His voice clipped. "Our intelligence was incomplete. This is a procedural error." He signaled to his men. "Harbor Sentinel Bureau is withdrawing. This is now a civic matter." They dissolved, melting back into the shadows of the containers, their authority vanishing like smoke. Halden Crow was left alone, standing in the headlights, his face crumbling. This is a fabrication, a deep fake, a syndicate plot. Is it a new set of sirens, clean and official, cut through the night, not the fake bureau, not Ardo's diversion, these were the real police. 3 blue and white cruisers of the Metro Civic Wardens slid to a stop, their lights washing the dock in red and blue. An officer stepped out, a woman with a face that had seen everything. She wasn't looking at Crow. She was holding a thick, court-stamped document, the injunction Morel had filed hours ago. By order of the new Avalon District Court, she announced, her voice leaving no room for argument, all eviction proceedings related to Pier 19 are hereby frozen, pending a full investigation into predatory lending and fraud. A roar, a physical wave of sound, erupted from the crowd. The residents of Pier 19, who had been watching from the edges, broke down. Mrs. Petrov, who was being tended to by a paramedic, was weeping with joy. The city had stopped the machine. As the officers moved to secure the scene, I saw a shadow detaching itself, trying to slip away in the chaos. Owen. I stepped in front of him. He froze, his eyes wide with animal panic. He had nowhere left to run. "You're forgetting something, Owen," I said, my voice quiet. He licked his lips, his gaze darting to the officers. I don't know what you're talking about." "You owe me for the plate." He stared at me, uncomprehending, the $10 plate that had started it all. The warden officer was beside us. "Is this the man?" she asked, looking at me. "Mrs. Petrov." Her arm in a makeshift sling pointed a shaking finger. "That's him. He's the one who faked the papers. He's the one who pushed me." The officer looked at Owen, her eyes hard. "Sir, you're under arrest. Forgery, aggravated assault, and," she added with a glance at me, "petty theft." As she snapped the handcuffs on his wrists, the crowd went wild. It was over. It was really over. The rain was easing now, softening from a driving storm to a gentle mist. The first faint hint of gray was touching the eastern sky, outlining the massive container ships in the harbor. The air was cold, but it was clean. Dante walked over to me. He was watching the crowd, the residents of my building hugging each other, the dock workers clapping each other on the back. He was watching the city take its first breath. He took off his heavy wool coat, the one I had worn in the wine cellar, and draped it over my shoulders. It was a familiar gesture, heavy and warm. This time, I didn't hide in it. I grabbed the lapels, my fingers tangling in the thick wool, and I pulled him down to me. I kissed him. Right there on the dock, in front of the cameras, in front of the entire city. It wasn't the desperate, fiery kiss from the dining room. It was slow. It was long. It was a choice. My hand, the one holding the hard drive, I let fall to my side. My other hand came up and rested flat against his chest, right over his heart. It was beating that same steady rhythm, thump, 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 thump. His arms came around me, his hands settling on the back of my neck, his fingers gentle in my damp hair, holding me as if I were something precious. He kissed me back, a quiet promise in the emerging dawn, a statement that this was real. When we finally broke apart, the shouting had quieted, the reporters were filming, but they were keeping a respectful distance. He looked at me, his eyes, which had been so cold in the diner, now so full of a quiet, steady warmth that it took my breath away. "You don't need me to shield you anymore, Lyra," he murmured, his voice rough, "but I want to stand beside you." I smiled, a real smile, one that reached my eyes. "Beside me," I agreed, "not in front of me." He laughed, a short, soft sound of agreement. "Agreed." He kept his arm around my shoulder, and we turned to watch the sun rise. It broke over the harbor, a flood of brilliant gold and rose, catching the raindrops on the pavement until they sparkled like scattered diamonds. Someone, in the chaos of the night, had spray-painted a single sentence on the side of a rusted container. In the new morning light, the words glowed. Home is not a commodity. My apartment was safe. My city was waking up. I had a new job. One Morel had already offered me. I'd be running the new Casa Sorella community desk, a legal aid front for the Civetta, helping the other people Owen had targeted, and Dante. Dante had an organization to rebuild, to restructure, not as a syndicate of shadows, but as a protector of a justice the city had forgotten. But that was tomorrow. "I'm starving," I whispered. He looked down at me, his smile touching his eyes. "See you tonight," he said. "Marietta is making pasta." For a broken plate and a 42-second phone call, a forgotten waitress found her voice, a mafia boss found his heart, and New Avalon, finally, began to believe in itself. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and let us know. Share your thoughts and connect with other fans. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and be sure to like this video. And for extra support, hit that hype button to help this story be heard by more people.